Beth Bond with Southeast Green. We are the largest online news site for sustainable business news and environmental policy news. And in honor of Black History Month, I wanted to talk about a topic that is, hey, Marlboro man, I love your name. That's pretty funny. Is this your park? Uh, is your park next to a refinery? Tonight we're gonna talk a little bit about environmental justice. Now I know that there's so many fun topics to talk about, but I just have spent a lot of time learning about this and just felt like it was a really important topic to discuss, and would love to have people ask questions and throw up some hearts. And the reason they throw up the hearts is because I use the hashtag BHM, which stands for Black History Month, and we get some. Oh, come on, computer. Fist pumps when you throw hearts. So this is a park next to a refinery that was donated by the refinery, and this is just a perfect example of the oxymoron of doing good. Right? If the park is next to a refinery where the air quality, you see how bad the air quality is. And tonight I'm going to be talking, I want to introduce you to this guy named Robert Bullard. This guy is brilliant. I just heard him speak in Atlanta last month at an environmental justice forum at the Martin Luther King Center. And he's based out of Texas. And if you get a chance to hear him speak, please go hear him speak. He is just full of amazing stats. So I'm gonna reverse the camera. This is gonna be messy. I'll just apologize in advance, and then let's talk a little bit about environmental justice. Woo! Bad, too close. I'll back up some. Anyway, one of the big complaints about sustainability is that we spend too much time talking about saving these, right? The polar bears, which, hey, I'm not saying they shouldn't be saved. And by the way, isn't this adorable? It's made out of recycled plastic bottles. I got it from Coca-Cola. But the one of the conversations we need to be having is not just saving the polar bears, but how much what we're doing to the planet is actually affecting humans. And 55% of African Americans live in the Southeast, and the poorest communities are always located to power plants, toxic waste dumps, and landfills. And so for Black History Month, I thought we'd talk a little bit about that. There are studies after studies after studies done all over the country, but in particularly in the South, about how what we've been doing to the environment for the last 60 years is basically affecting the least of these. And so I wanted to bring awareness to this and tell you we've got a couple of items on the website. Once again, I'm with Southeast Green, and we are the largest online news site for sustainable business and environmental policy news in the Southeast U.S. And just wanted to sort of expose this conversation. There was a study done back in 2014 about Atlanta. That's where we're based out of, Atlanta, Georgia, and how y'all can see what a hoarder I am in my office. Every time I do this, all I can see is the stuff, the junk in the office. But basically what the study by Greenlaw did was it exposed how the poorest neighborhoods were affected by the most toxic areas in the city. And this is not unique to Atlanta at all. And a great sort of right now kind of issue is I don't know how many of y'all remember the TVA coal ash spill that happened up in northeast Tennessee, north of Knoxville, about 4 or 5 years ago. Well, the reason they keep coal ash in coal ponds is because it's ash and it flies and it has mercury and all kinds of toxins in it, and so they normally keep it in water. And what happened in northeast Tennessee is that dam broke and it flooded the valley beneath it. Well, there was so much coal ash they didn't know what to do, and so Alabama, my home state, said we've got a town that we will bring that coal ash to. Well, they brought the coal ash by train loads. I mean, multiple train loads. And instead of putting in a pond, because that had been the problem, as the pond fell apart, they just piled it up. and now the this African it's an African American town, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember the name of it. When I post this up on YouTube in Southeast Green, I'll have the links to the story about this. That coal ash is now basically just sort of mounded up in the city, and they're already seeing effects from asthma and lung diseases because this coal ash is basically flying around in the air, and it's not sequestered in any way. And this is the kind of issues where, unfortunately here in the Southeast United States, a lot of times poverty is connected to race. And this is a perfect example of what has happened with this conversation in the United States. Here's a fact that you might not know. 35% of African American children are more likely to have asthma than white children, and that's because of being near these plants, either a coal plant or a different kind of plant. Welcome to the show. We're talking about environmental justice and in the Southeast in particular, because that's where my base of knowledge is. But of course, this is an issue that's all around the world. And one of the anyway, so this plant is causing all kinds of issues with children and their asthma, because African American children who tend to be in poor communities in Southeast United States are more likely to be outside and closer to these coal plants, and so they're getting more exposure. Also, Atlanta, finally, after years and years and years, but for a long time, Atlanta was in the top 10 cities for asthma because we had so many coal plants, plus the congestion and the traffic. And so our children disproportionately were affected more by this issue. And so I just hope that people will really be aware of this issue. Just because we don't want it in our own backyard doesn't mean that we really want it in anybody's backyard. And there's a lot of great ways to prevent this from happening. And it's important for us to be aware of it and to fight for justice. And it's the same conversation of where we were sending electronics to be recycled, and they were going to India. And I don't know if anybody saw the pictures of the children who were with no gloves, no protective gear, nothing, pulling apart basically these toxic computers that are not toxic when encased, but when they start pulling them apart and things break apart, they become really toxic. And so now in the United States, there is a national organization. So when you go to recycle your electronics, you need to make sure that they're, and I'm sorry, once again, I can't remember the name of the organization, but you need to make sure that your electronics are being recycled safely here in the United States. And so if you're doing electronics recycling, you should be an informed consumer and make sure that they are a member of the organization that makes sure that these are not going overseas. And there was a horrific picture of the computers being dumped in Nigeria too. So environmental justice is such an important issue, and it is under the umbrella of sustainability. And I just couldn't let Black History Month go by and not mention the fact that we've got these areas, in the Southeast, it's an African American issue predominantly, but there's also challenges out in the West with Navajo Indian tribes. Another aspect of environmental justice is what's being sold in those dollar stores. I'm not picking on a single dollar store. It's all those stores that are selling things really inexpensively, serving poor communities, but more often than not, the products that they're selling have toxins that we would not see in middle-class neighborhoods, and they are sort of just dumping them off into the poor communities. And I've heard people say, well, they need things too, and they do need things, but they don't need things that contain toxins and that are going to kill them. And if we're going to fight for what we want, in more economically viable areas, we should also be just as concerned about what the poor is, because it ends up being a health issue. And then who pays for the health, right? Who pays for the health care when people are exposed to toxins at a higher rate, and so they have higher rates of cancer and asthma, which we've already mentioned, and other health issues. Autoimmune diseases is a big part of this conversation. So happy Black History Month, everybody, and thanks for watching. And when this I always save my scopes and they go up on Southeast Green and YouTube, and we'll make sure we include the links about the conversation of environmental justice. Thanks so much. Have a great evening.